Well, since apparently a lot of you are very impatient, I figure I better fill the void. Here you go, an updated 2-round edition of a 2017 NFL mock draft. 3-round edition will come next week when I have a little bit more time to really sit down and work on it. Probably will come out sometime in the middle of the next week, but it'll be 3 rounds. I hope, I plan. But as a compromise, I gave you 2 rounds this time. All 64 picks are in the description box down below. So let's talk a little bit about this one. We're 1 week away from the end of the regular season. So we're 1 week away from the first 20 picks being locked in, the order being set for picks 1 through 20. And right now, even though they won a game this past weekend, the Cleveland Browns were done a big favor by the San Francisco 49ers, who also decided they were going to beat the Rams because the Cleveland Browns at 1-14 are still the leaders in the clubhouse to get the #1 overall pick in the 2017 NFL Draft, which I would ultimately expect them to get. Anything could happen, though, but I would expect them to earn that, and they have earned that, no question about it. When you look at the Cleveland Browns, until they get a quarterback, nothing is going to matter, and that's just the truth of the matter. Now, in this particular draft, I don't know if Mitch Trubisky, DeShone Kizer, or any other quarterback is frankly worth taking #1 overall. So while I could sit there and say, leave it to the Cleveland Browns to be in the position to take a quarterback and pass on a quarterback and mock them for it, and probably still ultimately will, when you look at it at this particular time, it's hard to say that there is truly a quarterback, at least at this moment in my eyes, worth taking #1 overall for them. So then you have to go with best player on the board. Now, if I were the Cleveland Browns and I wanted the best player on the board that wasn't a quarterback, it might very well be Jonathan Allen. Now, of course, they're the Cleveland Browns. In some way, shape, or form, I'm sure they're enamored and in love with Myles Garrett, and that'll probably ultimately be the guy, even though I would question a little bit his schematic fit for the Cleveland Browns and what they do on defense. He's still a very talented athlete, and if you eventually figure out where to play him, like the Texans, it took a couple of years for them to figure out where to play Jadeveon Clowney, but now that they finally got him into a position that was more in line with where he should have been as an end as opposed to an outside rush backer, he could be productive. The Cleveland Browns at the end of the day, as much as anything else, while, like I said, until they find a young quarterback to build around, they're not going anywhere, and that's still true. They need to come out of this draft with impact players, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Because it does no good to get the quarterback and then have a bunch of scrubs around him, because then ultimately you don't have the quarterback because the quarterback busts out, and then you're repeating the same process. And oh my God, I'm describing the Cleveland Browns since 1999. Myles Garrett would be a step in the right direction. In terms of the 49ers, why Trubisky over DeShone Kizer? I think Trubisky would fit better with what Chip Kelly wants from the quarterback position. Now, that's, of course, assuming that Chip Kelly will be retained for 2017, and that is a pretty big, mighty assumption at this point. But why go through the rigmarole of bringing him in and having yet another head coach, just like Tim Tonsula, that you bring in to be your head guy and then only have him there for 1 year? Now, if anybody needs to be fired right now in San Francisco, it's Trent Baalke, not Chip Kelly. But you had to know the 49ers were going to be bad, and there weren't too many coaches in the league anyways that were going to make this team a whole lot better. I mean, if you brought in Bill Belichick to the San Francisco 49ers, they're what, a 5 or 6 win football team? They're that bad. If arguably the best coach of all time could only get them to 5 or 6 wins, and that may be being generous, Chip Kelly at 2-13 hasn't done a horrible job. I'm just saying. Which leaves the Bears at #3. Now that one of the quarterbacks is off the board, some Bears fans might pine for DeShone Kizer. Many may probably not. At this particular moment, I don't pine for DeShone Kizer. As badly as the Bears need a young quarterback, as much as I would love nothing more than to be a young quarterback worth taking at 3rd overall to really begin the rebuilding process once and truly for all, and start the Bears on an upward trajectory, the bottom line is if there's not one taking there, you don't reach for them. And if there are better players on the board, you take them. Now, DeShone Kizer may end up being the best quarterback in this draft. He may not be. He may only be the 2nd or 3rd best quarterback in this draft. Soon enough, you'll know from me where he ranks. But when I look at a DeShone Kizer, I don't know if I see dude factor. And I don't want to take a quarterback in the top 5 if I'm uncertain if he has that dude factor or not. In terms of defensive players, Jonathan Allen may have as much dude factor as anybody in this draft. And when you look at the Bears team, they've got a defense that has played well at times, but really still lacking in talent, in particular impact players. Here is a guy that is a natural fit as a 3-4 defensive end, and he could come in and have a, dare I say, almost J.J. Watt type of impact at that position. He's a beast. He's a stud. As much as I like DeForest Buckner coming in the last year's draft, Jonathan Allen is a better football player, period. And if Jonathan Allen was in the 2016 draft, I would have advocated for him being a higher ranked player than DeForest Buckner at the same position. Jonathan Allen is a stud. There is no question about it. And if the Bears were able to get a guy like Jonathan Allen here, while it wouldn't be a quarterback, I'd have to feel really, really good about the direction of the organization and what that defense could potentially be, getting an impact player like him. Now, when you look in terms of the rest of the draft, some things that may stand out to you, you see Leonard Fournette dropping all the way to number 20. That's not necessarily a reaction to him skipping his bowl game. That is a reaction more so to the fact that he's been kind of dinged up in 2016, which in part led to the decision of skipping the bowl game. That also lends itself to the fact that as much as people look at Leonard Fournette and see dude factor, there are times of dude factor, but you can look consistently and blame the system, blame the team that he was on and everything else. But this was a guy that against the big opponents, Alabama and others, in those marquee games, he showed up very small. And if I'm taking a running back in today's NFL, I want a guy that could be an impact player against anybody. And I have concerns about whether Leonard Fournette can be, and I have concerns about whether or not he's really a game-breaking type of talent at the running back position. I still think he's a first-round pick. But I truly, honestly believe that where I have him slotted is more in line with who he is than what the media is actually putting out there right now. So you'll see I have Dalvin Cook as a top 10 pick, very reminiscent to me of Jamal Charles. I think a more explosive, game-changing type of back. Could do more things offensively as a running back than Leonard Fournette can. I just frankly think he's probably the better football player. And he's the running back that I wouldn't be surprised if more teams valued him over Leonard Fournette, and he ended up being the first running back off the board. In terms of DeShone Kizer, you'll see that I ultimately have Cleveland passing on him at number 10 for Zach Cunningham. Again, Cleveland might sit there and say, hey, we could take the quarterback here, but we want to get another marquee player. Could be a Zach Cunningham, could be a Reuben Foster. They do need impact players all over the place, so they just need good players at this point. Arizona taking DeShone Kizer, if he was there, they'd be stupid to pass on him. Now, maybe DeShone Kizer belongs more as a pick in the 20s in terms of his talent and who he is. But when you're the Arizona Cardinals, I don't know how much patience Bruce Arians is going to have to work with a young quarterback, but how much patience can you have to work with Carson Palmer anymore? I mean, it's been a gaping void for the Cardinals for years. If a guy like DeShone Kizer is staring them in the face in the first round, they must take him. Forget other team needs. Your number one team need is a young quarterback to replace Carson Palmer. Because until you get that guy in the wings and until you make that happen, you're going to only go down from here. What happened to the Arizona Cardinals this year is only the start of a very steep downward trajectory if they don't find a very quick, young answer at the quarterback position to replace Carson Palmer. Again, this draft, very, very good in the secondary. Lots of corners are going to get taken in round one. Several safeties will be taken in round one. Hopefully Malik Hooker will change his mind and ultimately decide to declare, because instead of Jamal Adams, he would be the one potentially taken in the top 5, because he could be that transcendent type of game-changing safety along the lines of an Eric Berry or, dare I say, a Sean Taylor. But definitely a really good class for the safeties, and especially at the cornerback position. Along with running back, that's still a strong class. Even though you had guys like Royce Freeman and Nick Chubb decide that they're going back to school, you still have guys in the mix that could be first-round picks like Curtis Samuel, who I have go 30 to Oakland, Christian McCaffrey, Deontay Foreman from Texas. So there is talent there at the running back position. Jeremy McNichols from Boise State is a day 2 type of guy. It's a solid draft. I don't know if it's a great draft. It would be helped out a lot if the quarterbacks were better. In terms of the quarterback position, again, in this draft, I keep coming back to it because that position is so important. You could see guys get drafted high. You could see guys really drop. It's hard to know. And I think there's going to be a lot of uncertainty with this draft revolving around what happens with those quarterbacks, because depending on what happens with those quarterbacks, it could throw everything kind of into a flux.